Welcome back, Divergence. Today you are in for a treat because you've actually got one of my favorite people on the planet, one of the longest standing mentors, friends that I've had in my business career ever since I left government. He's known as America's integrity expert. We vibed from day one, conversation one. He's been a godfather of sense to my daughter. He has kept me on my track and on my path my entire existence and reminded me of who I am in that integrity above all things, and knowing that everything that I do, everything that he does is for the betterment of you, the betterment of humanity. And what we're here to talk about today is the three possible futures of humanity, the unholy holy trinity of what we're staring reality in the face with. And so please help me welcome my guest, my best friend, Dr. David Gruder. David, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Justin. It's a pleasure to be with you as always, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So, David, the world is crazy right now. And no matter how you look at it, right? No matter on what side of the false science that's being promoted is telling us as to who we are, right? The divergence mindset being under attack, the who we are being under attack, the dependency on AI, the dependency on the oligarchy, the survival mechanisms that are kicking in play for a lot of people as they see all these things that are coming into fruition of what does this mean, the level of uncertainty out there, what's it going to mean for business, what's it going to mean for jobs, what's going to mean for all of that. When you look out, there's a lot of people going, check please. Right? Check please. Can we just be done here? Can we just be done here? But nobody really has a solution because our nation's so young and the world is chaotic and our perspective is in a fishbowl essentially here in the United States. And we're this petri dish of, we know exactly where we fall on the timeline of history repeating itself, and we don't know what to do. Because for all the reasons why history happened before, it's happening again, and we're in this brand new area that we've never been before. So as you look out, what do you see the three futures are? I know you and I've talked about it, but let's bring the audience. What are the three potential futures that we're looking at right now?
Right. Well, as I view it, we've got, and I'll name those in a moment, but we've got one of the three futures that's impossible, even though people are pretending it's possible. One that is possible and, in my judgment, devastating, inadvisable, and one that is what I believe we're meant to evolve into. So those three, the one that's in the end impossible is what I call regressionism, trying to go backward to a romanticized version of the past, so a delusional version of the past anyway, sanitized, leave it to Beaver.
Let's just call it what it is. Let's just call it what it is. Whitewashed. A whitewashed version of the past.
Yeah. And figuratively and literally whitewashed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's one that I call regressionist. And even though there are steps that are being taken in that direction, it can't happen. We never go backwards. So it's being attempted, and it's not going to last, I don't think. The second is what I call Homo Machina, human machine. It's Latin for human machine. And this version of the future is the one that a lot of arrogant people with a lot of power and a lot of money are pursuing because they have this delusion that they know what's best for all of humanity. And
that's the Matrix version, right? That's the one where they put the chip in your brain. I mean, the technology's out there. They've already learned how to harness our own energy, right? It is literally the path of the Matrix. I agree.
right. And that's where we become 21st century serfs or slaves.
Right.
And it's not like that is something new. This kind of arrogance has existed throughout human history. But what's new is that, unlike in the past where we had individuals who decided that they were smart enough to figure out the future for their little region or their fiefdom or their little, geographical area that they were the chief of, or the king or the queen of. Today, because of the internet, this mindset is now trying to rule the future of the entire planet rather than just one segment of humanity. So that's Homo Machina.
It's called programming, folks.
Yep.
It's called programming on TV for a reason. Kill your television. Everything you see on the news, everything you see on media, and anybody that you see on new media that subscribes to the patriarchy is trying to instill that programming and reinforce that programming into you.
Right. And what I'll say as a footnote for those who aren't familiar with that is that there's a vast difference between the patriarchy, as we're calling it, rightly so, which is toxic. It's part of the past. It's not part of the future, versus divine masculine consciousness, which is not the patriarchy. So just as a footnote.
Yeah, let's just hold that. Thank you for that clarification for the listeners and the people that are watching this, because that is so important, right? We need to understand that the patriarchy in man's kingdom is ego. The patriarchy in the masculine divine, where it is in partnership with the divine feminine,
right,
is where we harmonize. And this is why the patriarchal mindset is wanting to kill empathy, because empathy is what leads to the divine masculine.
Right.
And what's the third?
So just to quickly review, the patriarchal mindset is part of the regressionist future. Then we've got the Homo Machina future, the 21st century slaves. And the third, which is what I'm an advocate of, and I know you're an advocate of, is what I call Homo Spiritus, which is Latin for human spirits, where our intended future, as I see it, is we're intended to become conduits of higher love, wisdom, and power in the physical universe.
I love that. In the reason why I love that so much and why it resonates with me is the term spiritus. Spiritus refers to spirit, which refers to soul, which refers to, in my brain and in what I did with the military, in the quantum realm of things, it's energy.
Right.
And when we recognize ourselves as energetic beings, right, this is where our body of work comes in, the human energetic response theory, and it aligns so nicely up with your overarching concept of the future of human spiritus. The question I have is I know the challenges in waking people up and pulling them out of the matrix. Essentially, that's what's happening, right? People are getting sucked into the matrix. Oh, tell me, I don't have to think. Oh, I just have to push this button, and you're gonna make sure I get enough money just to get by, and I can feel safe and secure, and I get my serotonin blast every now and then.
And I should call that happiness, by the way.
And I should call that happiness, right? I mean, that's called a lobotomy. That's what that's called. It's called a chemical lobotomy of literally taking your own programs and lobotomizing yourself from your full potential and who you are and who we are as a humanity. And that's what that middle section. What was that one middle called again? I mean, it's
Homo Machina. Homo Machina. Human machine.
Yeah, human machine, right? Is essentially what that is. It's like AI. I mean, if you've got to put on Google glasses to go to your job, you might want to take some serious consideration as to the lack of humanity that exists in those containers. right?
Exactly. And here's another footnote, because I know from our discussions that you and I are not anti technology. We're not against the development of technology and the development of AI. We're against AI and other technologies being the boss of humanity.
Correct. I mean, when we got oligarchs who are advocating and cheering on AI is going to be smarter than my children, that should scare the living shit out of you folks,
Yep.
because AI should never be doing your thinking. If you're abdicating your decisions, your well-being, your survival, your anything to anybody outside of yourself, then we're screwed.
You
And
know,
here's the thing, David, I got to ask you this.
Yeah.
We're connected in more than one ways, as everybody else is. And we know that the world's looking in. We know that there are people inside there looking out. I'm a firm believer that there are more human spiritus of us, the what some people refer to as humanoid, right, versus human, right? There's a difference, right? If you're a human, you're programmable, but if you're a humanoid, you're your own being, right? You're divergent. And I believe there's more of us now that are tapped into the energetics of ourselves, the spirituality, and the energetics that connect us through that love space. What are you seeing? Why such the pushback right now from those that are claiming independence, right? The ones I see that are yelling the loudest are the ones that are pounding their chest, ruled by the cock and sword, and still think that's right at the expense of everybody else. Why are we seeing such resistance right now from that?
Oh, well, the way I see that, it's a great question, Justin, and I actually see that as good news. And the reason I
Me
see
too.
it as good news, cool,
Me too.
is because they wouldn't be doing that if they weren't terrified that their age was over. If they thought they were still running the show, they wouldn't have to be screaming from the rooftops and doing all kinds of lying and propaganda and manipulation and selective feeding of data and ignoring other data. They wouldn't be doing any of those antics if they were actually still in charge. So the more that they scream and the more vile they become and the more radical they become, the more I know we're closer and closer to critical mass in up-leveling humanity.
Yeah, I agree. And folks, just so you know, I mean, this is something you have to take into consideration, that the reality that we exist here inside the United States, it's an illusion. I mean, the world view of how the world looks upon us, we're spoiled fucking brats in the eyes of the rest of the world, right? When we think that we can go anywhere, do anything that we want. And while on the individualistic level, there are relationships that validate that's not true, that's because those relationships are authentic and individual and unique to you. But the overarching perspective of how the world views us right now, we're the redheaded stepchild of the world, throwing a temper tantrum right now. And we're the youngest nation on the planet. Well, one of the youngest nations on the planet, right? Still new, still learning, still evolving. And we have to move out of that binary system. We have to allow for additional thought outside of the left-right conversation. It's time to take a look at evolving the democracy, not dissolving it.
Yes, and part of that is remembering what the audacious vision was that birthed the United States in the first place, and moving back into integrity with a 21st century expression of that higher vision. And a lot
My
of
wife,
people don't even know what that is.
no, my wife said it best the other day as she reminded me from the play Hamilton, and he actually said it best in his presentation there. There was room for both Hamilton and Burr. There still is room for both Hamilton and Burr. And we need to realize that. Honestly, I think the best thing that we can do as a nation is if we went back to whoever won, loser comes from the second, is the runner-up. That becomes the VP.
Yeah. Let's underscore that, because a lot of people, that's one of many things people don't seem to know or remember or were never taught, which is that originally the way that presidential elections were set up was that whoever got the most votes became president, and whoever got the second most votes became vice president. This country was not built on the party system as it exists today. There were parties, but it wasn't built on the party system the way it is now.
No, it was built and meant to work together in collaboration, because the founding fathers recognized that it's going to take all of us to run this thing, to take all the divergent thoughts into consideration. And it wasn't until Burr came along and did what he did, right, out of competition, that fear-based element. If I don't win, I'm going to try to get ahead by bashing everybody and thinking that I'm going to get to play with those same people that I just got done bashing. Okay, folks, are you paying attention? This is the very problem that David and I are talking about here, is if we can go back, if there's any form of regression that we can go back to, David, it would be actually just not a regression. It'd actually just be reinstating how it was actually meant to be done in the first place.
Yeah, that's not what I mean by regressionism. That's reaffirming, that's reconnecting. And, in the keynotes that I've done over the past couple of decades, and also media appearances, I ask people, whether it's the audience or it's a show host, to tell me what the United States mission statement is. And most of them say, "What, we have a mission statement?" And I say, "Yes, we do. It's just not called that. It's called the preamble to the United States Constitution." But that is the mission statement. And I say to them, I don't expect you to have the wording memorized, but what's the essence of that mission statement that's captured in the preamble? And do you know that the vast majority of people that can name anything from it only name one thing?
What's that?
Freedom. Which is part of it.
It's in there. It's a piece.
It is in there. But what people don't know is that the mission statement, the higher vision of the United States, was to create a country whose government was a servant to its people, not to itself and not to special interests, and was mandated to function at the intersection of self-sovereignty, which is personal freedom, and societal well-being, which is the common good. It's the harmony between personal freedom and the common good that this audacious experiment called the United States was built around. Not either or, not one more important than the other, but both in harmony with each other.
I so love you, David. I so love you. This right here, folks, this right here is what is at the heart of everything going on in the world right now. And if you're a leader, if you're a corporate leader, if you're a manager, you have to understand that this is impacting your people on a daily basis, because it's impacting you on a daily basis. We know you're feeling the uncertainty. Follow David, follow what he's teaching, follow what he's doing in the world. This man has got nothing but the greatest concern and consideration for humanity in his body of work. I've been by his side, walking him in his, dare I say, shadow for a long time, because he has been the light in my life and the reassurance that I'm not fucking crazy, because I know what I know, because I was part of the machine. I was part of the machine. It's why I left. Right? It's why I left, because I was like, no more. I will not walk this path any further. And I left 15 years ago, 2011, 14 years ago. And it's become my purpose. Is make no mistake, this is why David is in my life. He was able to reflect that for me as he's reflecting for you here now. And it comes down to this, folks. Chat GPT, Hamilton Burr, use it. Critical thinking, get beyond the headlines, right? Start challenging. If it's coming from Joe Rogan, question the fucking shit out of it. If it's coming from anything impact theory, question the shit out of it. Anybody that's got any type of white privilege influence that carries that patriarchal mindset, you need to challenge the thought. Take it to Chat GPT and say, is this true? Show me some context. Start challenging what the status quo is telling you.
And what I would add is that kind of critical thinking, that kind of questioning belongs across the spectrum, meaning that there are, how do I describe this? Here's how I can describe it. In the post-World War II generations, there was a world view that in psychology was called the just world hypothesis. It was the mindset, the paradigm that said the world isn't out to get us. The world is basically benevolent, and that most leaders, even though there are always going to be corrupt leaders, most leaders are really out to serve us. It was a just and fair world, and that's been completely obliterated in today's world by its opposite, the unjust world hypothesis, where everyone is sinister, everything is out to get us. And so what I want to impress on our audience is the notion of false positives and false negatives. And what a false positive is thinking something is true when it's false. It's not. And a false negative is thinking something is false when it's actually true. And that's why everyone needs to question everything. Not everything is a conspiracy. Some things are brought about because of stupidity or ignorance or mischanneled good intentions. And some things are conspiracies that people are deluded into thinking aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the it's how those that are in power blind the masses through consumption. It's, imagine, if you will, you're a 4-year-old child and you're just now able to start comprehending the physical abuse that you receive from your father every time you do a certain behavior. And even when you're not doing that certain behavior, he reinforces the fact by calling you stupid. You're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid. And reinforced with the smack every time you do something that pisses your father off, because he doesn't like the false truths that he's come to believe. He's not been able to reconcile those energies with himself, the cognitive dissonance that he knows is creating this exact reality that he truly doesn't want. Because he is your father, he does love you, but he's got his own programs, his own fears, because those first two realities, the regression one and the matrix one, those are created from the small g self, the small god, ego, which is designed to protect itself in all things, to whereas Homo Spiritus removes the ego, trusts the flow, trusts the connection, trusts the 4 layers of consciousness that we have and experience, because we all know what love feels like. We all know what it means to connect. We all know and say that we're not going to turn somebody in for an un-American behavior, but right now there's half the country that would.
You just pointed out something I really want to underline, which is a part of our inner work. There's inner work to do and there's outer work to do, right? And a part of our inner work is very much connected to what you were saying about those kinds of self-defeating messages that most of us grew up around, regardless of who we heard them from. It could have been a parent, either parent, both parents. It could have been a sibling. It could have been in a place of worship. It could have been in school. It could have been peers. It could have been from anywhere. But those self-defeating messages, when we're children, they get internalized and they get formed into a part of our internal community of self that I refer to as our inner critic. And our inner critic tears us limb from limb, no matter what. It shames us and blames others. And as long as we are slaves to our own inner critic, until we have grown up what became our inner critic into the golden part of ourselves that it's intended to become, which we can get into if you want. But until we've become free from the tyranny of our inner critic, we are going to be susceptible to those negative messages in the outer world, either susceptible in terms of taking those negative messages, those self-defeating messages on, or standing in rebellion against those negative messages. And if we're only busy rebelling against what's wrong runs us.
Yeah, and that is the problem. Right now, let's take a step back further and let's look at this at generational now. So that internal conversation that you're talking about, that internal critic that we have, what happens when that's put upon trauma, built upon trauma? So there's trauma, and then that internal critic. What happens exactly over time? Let's say that 4-year-old child. I'm going to use the example here. January 28th just passed, which reminds me, we had an entire generation of Generation Xers, literally millions of kids under the age of 50 that are now 50 that were traumatized by watching the Challenger explode. We all sit in the classroom and we are all hyped. It was the talk of the times. Let's get everybody rallied up in it. And then boom. And then we all got sent out to recess, took to the weekend, and came back on Monday like it was nothing happened. And then no forever to be mentioned, therefore, again, by any teacher for the next decade of space exploration for the fear of activating that trauma because we didn't know anything about trauma back then, right? We were still, PTSD was not even a thing yet. That was Jill Chambers, right? Our good friend Jill Chambers, Colonel Jill Chambers, who put her career on the line to make sure the government recognized the invisible wounds from PTSD. And we've got an entire generation that was traumatized in a single moment. And here we are in the world today. And I think, and it's just many of one that I can assume, but at least as far as a nation is concerned, that we all as a nation experienced a level of trauma that was never healed. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I agree with you. So I'm going to start by just sharing a personal story about the Challenger explosion. So at the time that happened, one of the hats that I wore was that I was a trainer for the San Diego County Office of Education's Management Academy. And so I was training administrators, school administrators, and there was a training program that I was scheduled to run the night of the day that the Challenger explosion happened. And I chose not to cancel it. I chose to hold it, and I opened it up not with what I was planning to cover, but with the issue of trauma. How are you all doing with this explosion? How are your teachers that you're an administrator with going to be doing? How are your students going to be doing? It was an amazing, heart-opening evening that I was able to facilitate. So it was a very interesting synchronicity that I was giving a program for school administrators on the night of the Challenger explosion. So we've got personal trauma and we've got collective trauma. There was also obviously the collective trauma of 9/11. There
Yeah.
have been multiple of those. The first collective trauma I lived through was John F. Kennedy's assassination. And
Yeah.
then after that, Malcolm X's and Bobby Kennedy's assassination and Martin Luther King's assassination and the Kent State Massacre. I lived through all of those traumas, and they did have an impact on me. So there's individual trauma and collective trauma, but the problem is not the trauma. I mean, what's traumatic is usually unacceptable behavior. It's not, don't get me wrong about that. But the problem is that we have life experiences that we're not equipped to know how to digest in ways that help us expand our lovingness, our authenticity, our positive impact in the world. Instead, those traumas become undigested life experiences that shut down parts of our authenticity and parts of our capacity to connect with others and parts of our ability to have positive impact in the world. And that's where the problem is, because we go into survival plan when we have an undigested life experience or a series of undigested life experiences that result from not knowing how to turn trauma into blessing, into what I call an awful gift.
How do you transmute that energy? Because it is energy. The trauma comes in. It's a traumatic experience energetically that comes in your mind that your brain now has to sort through. Am I going to die? Are other people going to die? What does this mean? What does that mean? And all those kinds of things. And it impacts that energetics. And it's a matter of being able to override the programs that are activated, the survival programs that are activated by the trauma to rise above it, right? It's the Doctor Strange quote where the ancient one goes, Mordo, we never get rid of our demons. We just learn to rise above them, right? It's that, and those traumas that we have signify those demons that we have. And what do we feed? Do we feed those programs that activate the inappropriate behavior, that justify that trauma and use it as an excuse to continue to do harm on others as a mean of, well, I was hurt, therefore I'm going to hurt others, right? It's the anti-hero versus the superhero, right? The superhero versus the supervillain mindset, where the supervillain takes that trauma and goes, oh, somebody did this to me, therefore I'm going to make the world suffer for it, right? It's what Hitler did, right? He took all of his mommy issues and took it out on the entire Jewish nation, right? 6 million people because he had mommy issues, right? And we can look at the parallels.
And gypsies and others too.
Right, exactly. I just, it's so many more, right? And now we look at what's going on, right? Elon Musk has got some parenting daddy issues because his son transitioned from a son to a girl, to a daughter. And now look what's happening in the LGBTQ community and what's being targeted and anything transgender. This is the same exact storyline. It's same exact thing. It's the super villain mindset versus the superhero mindset, which says, ooh, this hurt me. This is how I overcame it. And I'm going to take it to the world to help others so they could overcome it. And that's where every superhero story comes from, where every supervillain story comes from, right? It's history. It's in the comic books. It's in the movies. It's the hero's journey. But when we're staring at faced with reality, it's sometimes hard to see for our own programming and our own biases. So how do we awaken more people from that, David? What are you seeing in that space?
Right. Oh my gosh, you said so many mouthfuls here. But let me just respond directly to the last question you asked. How do we help people awaken? Well, there's an old saying, mostly people change not because they see the light, but because they feel the heat.
Like a moth to a flame.
So, for a lot of people, what it takes to start waking up is being what I call bludgeoned into surrender. I have had bludgeoning into surrender experiences in my life. I've been able to turn them into massive gifts, but I don't recommend them. I recommend becoming a happy learner. But
There's a lot easier path.
yes. And in order to become a happy learner, we have to emerge from spells we don't know we're under. I mean, that's the definition of a spell. If you think about fairy tales, when a person's under a spell, they don't know they're under one. So the first step in waking up is recognizing the spells we've been under. And I have devoted a lot of attention to articulating 5 major societal spells that imprison people and 5 major personal spells that imprison people.
Pause right there. I just want to give a little clarification. If the word spell somehow triggers your modern sensibilities, to quote Dr. Strange again, call it programs. Spelling is a program. It's coding. Spelling is writing words, right? Spelling is writing words. Spelling is speaking words. That's where witchcraft came from. Spelling. You're writing words. These are programs, the things that you're learning. What are the 5 spells or the 5 programs? What are they?
The societal spells are faulty formulas around happiness, health, prosperity, patriotism, and problem solving.
You heard it, folks. That right there sums it up in a nutshell. What are the others?
So on the personal level, the 5 ingredients of our personal spell are the 5 ingredients that create a survival plan, a childhood survival plan. Because most of us, unless we've done a lot of personal work, we don't know that we're prisoners of childhood. And that personal spell starts with in most people, a happy ending fantasy, although in some people, it starts with false hopelessness, a sense of there's never going to be a happy ending. It's always going to be horrible, and all I can do is take advantage of whatever I can take advantage of, and to hell with its impacts on other people. So yes, there are some people who can't invent as children a happy ending fantasy. Most of us did invent some form or other of a happy ending fantasy that says, yes, things can be better, and all I need to do in order to get things to be better is I have to figure out the rules I need to follow. So happy ending fantasy leads to a quest, a hero's journey, first hero's journey of childhood, to figure out the rules I need to follow in order to make the happy ending fantasy come true. And there are 2 sets of rules. One set of rules is, what do I have to cover up or change in me? And the other set of rules is, what do I have to do to make things easier for you, or at least contain you so that I am safer? And then the rules give way to the 3rd ingredient, which is a Pandora's box, the parts of us that we decide we have to cover up in order to survive. We put them away. We put them into safekeeping. We put them into the metaphorical equivalent of a Pandora's box. All of the evils we think we have, and not just. The Pandora's box is not just everything that we judge or learn is allegedly negative about us, but also we put into our Pandora's box the parts of our light that we discover are too much for other people.
Yeah, I think it's fragmented, right?
Yes.
It gets fragmented out, and so we only shine that little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, rather than shining out fully all the time.
And of course, when we do that, that leads to the 4th ingredient, which is persona, a mask. We adopt a public self, a way of trying to appear to others that's a combination of the parts of our life that are light that we discover we don't have to hide, combined with fake aspects of ourselves that we take on because they seem to be pleasing or positive for other people. So a mask is comprised of parts of our authenticity and parts of inauthenticity. And so we've got happy ending fantasy leading to rules, leading to Pandora's box, leading to persona, and all of these mental gymnastics that we intuitively go through as children, because this is our childhood genius. We don't wake up one morning and say to ourselves, oh yes, I have to invent a survival plan and it's got to include all of these ingredients. Our intuitive genius develops these for us. So all of these mental gymnastics that we're going through with these parts of our survival plan that I've just mentioned, happy ending fantasy, rules, Pandora's box, and persona, not only take a lot of energy there and not only are exhausting, but they don't work anyway. So that's the fifth and final element of a childhood survival plan, which is anesthesias. We have to develop ways to numb out the pain of, well, it could be alcohol, but it could be things, anesthesias that are socially applauded, like overachieving, right?
Oh, how much money you got in the bank account? Woo! Look how much money you got in your bank. Oh, he must be really smart. He must be really emotionally intelligent because he's got his shit together because he's got so much money in the bank.
Yeah, it could even be crusading, where we're trying to correct a wrong in the world. We're trying to do something good and something right, but we're doing it in order to try to redeem ourselves for having fucked up. And
we haven't done the forgiveness work.
And that's an unholy motivation to have positive impact. And an awful lot of leaders are under the control of that thing that a childhood survival plan morphs into an adulthood, which is the ego's version of a redemption plan.
Yeah. And to tie it back into what you said, folks, the only way out of that hellhole, this is the only way to describe it, is to start questing your way out of it. Quest, like we talked about spelling, right? Where that came from. Quest, origins, question, questing, quest, 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 question everything. Reality is not what you think it is.
And to do that kind of questing and questioning, and to undertake the heroes and heroines' journeys that those questions lead us into, requires a level of resilience that most people have never learned how to develop in themselves.
David, and that, my friend, is a great capstone, because that's a rabbit hole for another time, one of which I know people can go learn more about on your website. Can you share where people can go learn more about what you're doing, where you're doing, what you've got coming up in the world, and how they can follow your body of work, because it is so important where we're at today?
Sure. My main website is drgruder.com. That's spelled DRGRUD as in David, ER.com. And if you want to look specifically at what I'm focusing on right now, you can go to drgruder.com/2025.
Fantastic, folks. I highly, highly recommend that you go follow David, his body of work. If you can go listen to him talk in public, in person, and connect with him, he is by far one of the most authentic human beings you will ever meet, one of the most loving human beings and understanding human beings you will ever meet. I believe, David, you're going to be in Phoenix in June, correct?
Yes, just outside of Phoenix, just
Perfect.
west of Phoenix.
Perfect. So make sure you follow the events that he's a part of. I know you're part of the Mankind Project, folks. David is a leader moving the needle forward in and for humanity. Follow him; it's worth it. David, any final thoughts before we depart?
I just want to reiterate that the craziness that we're going through right now is because an old dysfunctional outgrown paradigm is falling away, and a new elevated Homo Spiritus paradigm is in the process of emerging. So don't let yourself fall into the trap of being wigged out by the insanity. Develop the muscles to be able to look on the insanity without getting toxified by it, and to re-own your own self-sovereignty, not in a narcissistic way, but in the spirit of self-sovereignty that serves us all.
And with that, folks, this is the Diversion Show. Love harder, love more. Till next time, take care, love each other, be well.